a senior here at Brevard majoring in environmental studies with a concentration in sustainable agriculture and a minor in pre-law. And over the past year, I've focused on developing a resource for beginning farmers that addresses the current and future needs of those in the agricultural industry. So whenever I was first looking at this question, my initial response was to look at who exactly are my beginning farmers. So essentially, a couple of main points on that is they are defined as having 10 years or less of farming experience. They are averaging age of about 46 years old, with the average age of a farmer overall being 56. And then they make up 27% of the entire farmer and rancher population, and all of that information comes from the United States Department of Agriculture Census, which gets sent out every 4 years to people in the agricultural industry. And so once I found that initial information and I found out who exactly my demographics are for this resource, I wanted to see what resources are available currently for farmers. I mean, what are some other concerns that they might not be addressed at this present moment? So initially I found the United States Department of Agricultural Risk Management Agency has defined 5 areas of risk for beginning farmers. And these are production, institutional, market, personal, and financial risk. Essentially all of these areas differ in terms of what they are, but essentially boil down to how well the farmer is able to produce their product, and what they can sell it for, and what profits they can make at the end of the day. And then in another couple of studies that I found, there were 2 other main areas of concern that seemed to pop up very often, and that was the financial obligations of farmers and the access to outside resources. So with farmers, they are often struggling to make a profit just with the changes in the market and changes in how much they can sell their product for, as well as the expensive equipment and the chemicals that they have to use to produce a safe product for people. And so with that, a lot of farmers are often looking at finding employment off of the farm. So 82% of a farm household comes from off of the farm. And then with that, 58% of farmers report having a primary occupation that is not involved in farming. So these farmers are not only trying to do what they want to do, and that's producing an agricultural product, but they're also having to work outside jobs and work double time just to make ends meet. And then with that too, the access to outside resources, they do live very difficult lives. You're farming 365 days a year, always on call for any sort of situation that might pop up that a farmer would have to respond to. And with that, there is a lack of support in 2 main areas, with the business and planning and support, and then the mental health resources. One of the most startling statistics that I came across in this research was that farmers are 5 times more likely to commit suicide than the national average. And you would think that that would not be a thing. You would think that it would be people with military service would be the most, but it's actually people in the agricultural industry that struggle the most with mental health care. And parts of that is they are isolated a lot more. Farming does happen in rural, a lot more segregated communities where you're not having access to people as much. And then as well as like the stigma with going and taking care of yourself mentally. Farmers and people in the agricultural industry struggle with that. And then business planning and support as well. Farmers, in 2018, 498 farms filed for bankruptcy. And that's only one reason why farms were going out of business. That's not including any other concerns, such as maybe having nobody to take over the farm, or having a large amount of death or destruction of your crop. So all of those things are just needed to be put more information out there. So once I gathered all of that information and figured out kind of what initially I was looking at and what resources farmers had available to them, I then generated the farmer and rancher questionnaire. So this was about 10 questions that I sent out over the span of about 5 months to various social media groups related to the agricultural industry. And so in total, I gathered 58 responses on this survey. Farmers could choose to identify their names and their states, and out of those people, 13 states were represented. I'm not 100% sure exactly how many other states were not represented from that, but I do know that 13 states and 58 responses. And then there were 2 other identifying questions. The first one was what type of agricultural operation the respondent was involved in. And with that, crop and livestock were the most prevalent. However, I did have 1 poultry farmer and then 1 person who is a bee farmer, so that's the apiary section right here. And so farmer respondents could choose multiple of these categories depending on what they're involved in. And then the second categorizing information was their level of experience in farming, because I wanted to see exactly where my respondents were coming from and how useful this information would be in generating this resource for the beginning farmers. 19% of my respondents were categorized as beginning farmers. So that's that 0 to 5 years and the 6 to 10 years. So this next 2 slides are a little bit of a doozy, so just bear with me, I'll walk you through it. So one of the other questions that I used primarily in this project was I asked the respondents to rank 6 categories of risk for beginning farmers, 5 of which came from the USDA Risk Management Agency. And I asked the respondents to rank them as not important, moderately important, or most important. So that's the red and the yellow and the green. And for the most part, these answers did share some similarities. So for example, we had 13% and 9%. So this category right here, this sidebar is the different categories. And then each of these 2 bars that are BF and EF, that's beginning farmers and experienced farmers. So for the most part, they stayed pretty consistent with each other. The only time that I really saw a major discrepancy, and this was over 20%, was in this production knowledge and financial knowledge piece. Experienced farmers, almost 20% more, said that that production knowledge and financial knowledge was more important. Whereas beginning farmers categorized it as moderately important. And with that, I was kind of shocked, because you would think that in starting a business, those would be the 2 most important things. But our beginning farmers in this survey just didn't see that as necessarily as important. And then with the next final 2 questions on the survey, I asked farmers to do 2 open-ended questions. And so this first one was what farmers reported wishing that they knew whenever they began farming. And took all of these answers and categorized them. And ended up with these 3 categories. So they wanted to know what other farmers were doing. They wanted to hear the stories of other farmers, as well as more information on that financial piece and on that production knowledge piece. So even though they weren't mentioning it in this graph, they were mentioning it in what they wish they had known whenever they began farming, which kind of shocked me that they were putting it on one section but not necessarily indicating it on another. And then with this next question, I asked the farmers what advice they would have for other people that are starting farming. And this was probably my favorite question in the entire survey, just because they were very encouraging and sending a lot of information for outside resources. Somebody said that if they wanted to farm with a spouse, to invest in marriage counseling. So I was like, okay, sure, that sounds about right. So taking all of this information, I then developed First Gen Farmhouse. So First Gen Farmhouse is an online community where farmers can learn and support each other. And there's a couple of different components of this. So there would be articles and videos that are available in a multitude of formats, such as podcasts, video transcripts, PDF documents, so farmers can view it even whenever they're not sitting in front of a computer. This would also be cross-posted to various social media sites, so that way even whenever they're just scrolling through Facebook, they can still get that information without actively seeking it out. And then the best part about this service would be a community discussion board. This service would not be categorized by region or commodity. It would be open to anybody involved in farming. So this discussion board aspect would give farmers the ability to communicate with each other and build that community within each other rather than just having to drive off the farm to do that. They can do it online. So as expressed, farmers are diverse in their identifying factors and what they grow. However, they do share those similar concerns. And as we move forward in developing this next generation of farmers, we have to be aware of what their future concerns are going to be, but while addressing what they need to know for right now. So at this time, I just want to thank my parents and my grandparents for kind of being the inspiration behind all of this. My dad was a beginning farmer, so all of this kind of came from them. I would like to thank Professor Rajkovic and Dr. Mo for kind of standing beside me in all of this and pushing me even whenever I did not think I wanted to be pushed. And then also Dee Clark, Caitlin Honeycutt, Sarah Thomas, and all of the other respondents to my survey for letting me use their images and their stories in all of this. So thank you, and at this time I will take any questions.